The demands for financing Africa's development are really huge. If you talk about financing various infrastructural projects, be it transportation, roads, be it expanding our ports, be it the airports, and most critically, power. Demands a lot of resources, and most African countries are in this predicament that we lack adequate resources. So when our bank comes up with a proposal to beef up its capital, it's a natural way. Every other African country demands resources to finance its development. That this is the right way to go. We have to put in money ourselves to recapitalize our bank in order that it can do a better job financing Africa's development. So it was very clear, and the position of my government is that we have to contribute to capitalize our bank. The bank honestly is doing a great job. The bank has helped us do very critical roads to stimulate Tanzania's development. We have a road that runs from a town called Iringa. This is part of what we call the Great North Road to connect the Cape to Cairo. So it runs from Iringa through the new capital Dodoma, all the way linking up with Arusha. You can now drive very easily through that road to Arusha in a span of less than 4 hours. A stretch that used to take almost twice as the amount of time. This is just one. ADB has also helped us do a number of power projects. And in our second 5-year development plan, we made a conscious decision to industrialize Tanzania in line with one of the high fives patronized by this bank. You cannot industrialize without power. We are currently embarking on the development of a new standard gauge railway that will traverse Tanzania all the way from the major port, Dar es Salaam, connect with Uganda through Lake Victoria, and then all the way to Rwanda and also the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But how do you do a standard gauge railway without power? So indeed, the bank's high fives are well in line with the priorities of Tanzania. Our father of the nation made a very important point, that development is about people. It's not about buildings. It's not about these roads. Roads for what? Unless they have an impact on improving the welfare of our people. Again, which is one of the high fives of this bank. So very briefly, I'm so happy that it's a perfect fit between our priorities as a country and the priorities of the bank to help us spearhead the development. We want to be a middle-income country come 2025. So how do you do that? This is exactly the 5 points that you need to work on. And as a continent, you have to feed your people. So again, emphasis on agriculture, emphasis on agribusiness, and processing whatever you produce. This is really critical, and I think the bank is doing a great job in all these areas. The meeting we are going to have in Busan, I think, is critical. For us in Tanzania, as I already indicated, again, it's a perfect match. Our second 5-year development plan, the theme is economic industrialization, nurturing industrialization for economic transformation and human development. So really getting together around the table and thinking hard, what does it take to deliver on industrialization? What kind of industries would give our people the jobs that we need, would give us incomes to reduce the poverty of our people? These are issues that are easy to talk about. What kind of environment do we need to attract investment from outside, to invest in our manufacturing sectors? What kind of legal and regulatory framework is necessary to underpin our quest for industrial development? These are not easy issues. And the last one is, of course, how do we finance this dream? So for me, I think I look at the forthcoming discussions in Busan to really drill down on these issues so that it's not just utopia we are talking about. How do we industrialize Africa in practice? We are already doing some of this, but always it is key that we exchange ideas. Some of our African countries are doing better on some aspects. You look, for example, at the business environment. Rwanda is doing a fantastic job, as other African countries who are still trading behind. What is it that they are doing? So I think it is an opportunity to learn from one another. We don't have all the time to go and learn from far outside the continent. There are very good lessons within the continent that we can tap into and move forward. We can learn a lot from Korea. Korea rose from rags to riches virtually at the same time. If you look at the economic history of Korea in the early 60s, we were at par. And some African countries were actually much better than Korea. Ethiopia was far ahead. Ethiopia, Ghana were far ahead of Korea. So what is it that they did that puts them where they are now while we lag behind? I think these are very important lessons, both on policy, in terms of governance, the leadership of the political establishment, and focus. What are sort of the areas where you cannot afford to lose track? But of course, the Korea of the 60s is very different from the modern world of the time. So we also have to be conscious of new developments. How do we industrialize our continent at this particular point in time? The forces of globalization were not of the kind then. So there are lots of things that we need. And particularly, I think, for me, it's about technology. We are still lagging behind in terms of technological development. So innovation. So these are areas where Korea has made a lot of mileage. And I think we have a leaf to borrow from Korea, particularly in terms of technological development. The most urgent?
Yes, economic issue.
Well, there are several. In the context of the African continent, and I wouldn't say there is one single challenge that once you do this, we are over. No. Number one challenge, I think, as far as I'm concerned, one is infrastructure, broadly defined. But of course, that would include power infrastructure, transport infrastructure. See, in order to come here, I had to go to Dubai. And then from Dubai all the way to Accra, Accra to here. Why? Because we are not integrated. If we were integrated, this means we could even start tapping the African market. But we can't, purely because of the infrastructure, huge infrastructure gap that we have. Of course, second, I think it has to do with the skills profile in the African continent. I think, at least drawing from the Tanzanian experience, we have a major skills gap across board. And we need to work very hard, make sure that our youth, our young people, which is our greatest asset, has the requisite skills. We are talking about industrializing Africa. Who do you put in those industries? So we need to develop those kinds of skills and competencies that we require to be able to utilize in industrial development. I think there are several, but I'll start with those two.